Not everyone who disappears from your life was a loss. Some were just making space for the throne to be installed. Let that sit for a second. Because what if I told you the reason things have felt like chaos lately is because order was being negotiated behind your back? What if the silence wasn't neglect, but a divine pause before protection? Statistically, most people never realize the breakthrough is already in motion while they're still trying to fix the breakdown. The shift doesn't announce itself, it disguises itself. And the chosen ones, you don't get a warning, you get a summons. Now suddenly, someone's stepping in unapologetically, unshakably, ready to defend you at all costs, not because you're weak, but because they've finally seen what you carry and what hell's been trying to kill in you for years. So buckle up, because this isn't your regular blessings are coming speech. This is a reveal. This is justice with a heartbeat. And yes, it comes with a side of I told you so energy. Let's talk about the major shift in your abundance, the one no one saw coming, but you always felt was owed. Number one, you were forged, not favored. You weren't picked because life was easy on you. You were picked because life wasn't. Being chosen has never been about being lucky, blessed, or everyone's favorite. It's about being tested in ways most people couldn't survive. You got handed the dark room first, the silence, the betrayal, the being left out, the constant questioning of your worth. People looked at your life and assumed you were doing something wrong. What they didn't see was that you were being refined. What they called a breakdown was actually a breaking open. Chosen ones don't come wrapped in gold. They come wrapped in losses that don't make sense until years later. The universe didn't tap you on the shoulder because you were ready. It chose you so you could become. You weren't favored from birth. You were forged in fire, the kind of fire that burns everything you thought you were supposed to be until all that's left is who you really are. And the worst part, nobody clapped for you during that process. Nobody defended you when you were being dragged, misunderstood, or overlooked. In fact, they watched. Some laughed. Some stayed silent because it was more comfortable than speaking up. You had to walk through the darkest parts alone, but here's where it shifts. Now that you've survived what was meant to bury you, people are starting to take notice. But this isn't about proving them wrong. This is about understanding that the people stepping in to protect you now aren't doing it out of sympathy, they're doing it out of reverence. You became undeniable. You didn't earn protection by being helpless. You earned it by being unbreakable. You were never chosen because life was soft on you. You were chosen because life tried you and you didn't fold. You're not a survivor. You're evidence that the storm didn't win. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you rare. And that's why now, finally, someone's ready to stand beside you, not because you need saving, but because you're worth protecting. Number two, the betrayal was the interview. The silence was the reference check. The people who hurt you thought they got away with it. The ones who walked away without explanation, who stayed silent when they should have spoken up, who watched you struggle and didn't lift a finger, they thought no one saw it. But the truth is, every betrayal was being recorded, not by people, but by energy, by alignment, by something bigger than any audience or applause. Every time someone chose to abandon you in a moment you needed loyalty, it was counted, not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that when the storm hit, you stood alone, and that silence around you wasn't just neglect, it was evidence. Those betrayals weren't just moments of pain, they were spiritual interviews. Tests you didn't ask for, moments that revealed who was real and who was just around when it was easy. While you were crying, breaking, doubting yourself, thinking you were the problem, the universe was taking notes. You weren't losing people, you were watching truth unfold. People exposed themselves by how they moved when you were vulnerable. That's why their silence hurt so much. It wasn't just the absence of help, it was the realization that they were never with you in the first place. But the most powerful part? Some people were being watched too. They saw you struggle and didn't speak, but not because they were cold. They were observing, waiting, learning who you were under pressure. And those people, they're the ones stepping in now, not because they pity you, but because they recognize the weight you carried alone. They passed the test. While others failed you, they studied you. They respected your resilience even in your weakest moments. So now, someone is ready to defend you, not because you're fragile, but because you were too strong for too long without backup. Their loyalty wasn't rushed, it was proven. The betrayal was the test, but the protection showing up now? That's the reward. Number 3, you're not being blessed, you're being reimbursed. This isn't some random blessing falling from the sky, this is payback. Not in a bitter way, but in a divine, overdue, it's about time kind of way. What's coming to you now isn't new. It's what's been yours, but it was delayed, blocked, or stolen by the wrong people, the wrong timing, or even your own disbelief. You're not just entering a season of abundance, you're finally collecting on everything you were owed. Every time you were overlooked, every time you gave more than you got, every time someone took advantage of your kindness, drained your energy, or left you empty after you poured into them. This is not just a breakthrough, this is reimbursement with interest. People love to talk about blessings as if they're a surprise gift, but you earned this. You bled for this. You held yourself together when nothing made sense. You chose peace when chaos would have been easier. You stayed soft in a world that tried to harden you. That's not just good energy, that's spiritual credit. And it's finally clearing. That shift in your life right now, that unexpected support, those doors swinging open out of nowhere, it's not luck. It's divine accounting. You're not being rewarded for being perfect, you're being paid back for being consistent. When no one clapped, when no one said thank you, when you doubted if it was even worth it, the universe kept track. Life watched you lose and still keep your character. Watched you love people who couldn't return it. Watched you build others while your own foundation was shaky. You didn't fold, you didn't fake it. And that matters. So don't question why things are suddenly shifting. Don't second guess the goodness showing up. You're not tricking the system, you are the system balancing itself. This abundance, it's not random. It's a direct result of how you handled every loss, every betrayal, every lonely moment. It's not a blessing out of nowhere. It's compensation that's finally arrived. Number 4, your enemies aren't silent anymore. They're irrelevant. They're not quiet because they've matured. They're quiet because they've lost access. They don't have the range to reach you anymore, and that's not ego, it's truth. The people who once had so much to say about you, who stirred rumors, twisted your story, or tried to dim your light, they've run out of script. You've stepped out of the arena they needed you to stay in. They thrived off your reaction, your pain, your confusion. Now that you're no longer performing for them, they've got nothing to feed on. Their silence isn't growth, it's defeat. They didn't apologize, they just vanished. Not because you stopped being worth talking about, but because your elevation made their bitterness obvious. They can't match the version of you that no longer needs validation or conflict to feel powerful. You're not ignoring them. You're simply not even tuned in. You've risen into a space where their energy doesn't even register. Revenge is unnecessary when reality does the correcting. The best clapback is peace they can't disrupt, success they didn't expect, joy they can't touch. You don't need to prove anything. The spotlight they tried to steal now burns through their illusions. And that's the irony. What they meant for damage only sharpened you. There's nothing left to fight, no one left to chase. You've passed that level. Their silence is not resolution, it's retreat. They're not being quiet because it's the mature thing. They're quiet because they know they've been removed from the storyline. When you stop needing justice and instead embody it, you become untouchable. That's what happened. This is what happens when the chosen finally understand who they are. You stop trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing closure from people who only brought confusion. They don't need to be silenced. They already are. Not by you, but by the weight of your growth. Number 5, your glow was never meant to be humble. It was meant to expose. You weren't given light to keep it dim. You weren't made powerful just to blend in. That glow you carry, it's disruptive on purpose. It's not just beauty or charm or quiet confidence. It's exposure. It reveals what's fake, what's forced, and what's been faking it till it breaks. You were never meant to be subtle. You were meant to shine so unapologetically that it makes liars uncomfortable and opportunists nervous. That's why they tried to convince you humility meant hiding. The world has sold you a lie, that playing small is noble, that shining too brightly is arrogance, and that being loud about your gifts is a sign of ego. But shrinking never served anyone but the insecure. You weren't being humble, you were being controlled. And for what? So that the people around you wouldn't feel inadequate. So that you wouldn't draw too much attention, so that you wouldn't make waves. Let them drown. Because your light was designed to interrupt. It was made to expose what's false and surface what's real. You don't walk into rooms to impress, you walk in to reveal. And those who can't handle it, they were never meant to be in the room to begin with. Your rise wakes people up. It shakes foundations that were built on appearances and ego. And that's exactly why it's necessary. You've been taught to soften your truth so it doesn't sting. But sometimes your very presence is the lesson. You don't have to call people out. Your glow does that for you. Without a word, you unsettle the ones wearing masks and inspire the ones ready to take theirs off. That's the difference. You're not just light, you're fire. You were never meant to warm the room, you were meant to ignite it. So let your glow speak at full volume. Let it burn through the fake and illuminate what's real. Stop apologizing for the power they pretended not to see. They knew who you were from the start. They just hoped you'd never figure it out. Number 6. The one defending you now is not your savior. They're your reflection. The person standing up for you now isn't here to rescue you. They're here because they recognize you. Not just who you are today, but who you've always been, even when no one else could see it. They're not drawn to your struggle out of pity. They're drawn to your power. And not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet force you carried when no one clapped, when you kept going with nothing but your own spirit holding you up. You didn't attract a savior. You attracted a reflection. Someone who's walked their own fires. Someone who knows what it's like to fight battles alone, to grow without applause, to be doubted and still stay solid. That's why their presence feels different. They're not interested in saving you because they know you were never helpless. They're showing up because they see themselves in you, and they respect the hell out of what you survived. This isn't a handout. This is a match in energy. Their loyalty isn't about fixing you, it's about protecting what they know is rare. People like you don't come around often. You're not the loudest in the room, but your energy speaks. You don't demand respect, you walk in it. And someone finally showed up who can meet you at that level, not as a leader, not as a follower, but as a mirror. The ones who truly see you never have to be convinced to support you, they just do. Because what they're defending isn't just you, it's the frequency you both live on, the silent integrity, the unshakable heart, the no matter what resilience. They're not standing beside you to protect you from falling, they're standing beside you because you've already proven you won't. This kind of connection doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives when you've done the internal work. When your energy becomes so aligned that only someone equally forged in truth can enter. That's what this is. Not saving, not fixing. Just real recognizing real. Number 7, you had to be misunderstood to master clarity. You weren't confusing. You were just too layered for surface-level people. You spoke in depth while they listened in assumptions. You showed up as a blueprint, something meant to be studied, understood, and built with. But most were only prepared for easy reads and shallow connections. They mistook your depth for difficulty, your quiet strength for coldness, your focus for arrogance. But none of it was ever about being hard to know. It was about being hard to misuse. You were designed with intention. Everything about you, your emotions, your timing, your vision, even your silence, was part of a bigger structure. But they didn't take the time to look beyond the surface. They expected you to explain yourself in bite-sized pieces they could digest quickly. When you didn't, they called you distant, dramatic, or too much. But the truth is, you were never meant to be a performance. You were a map. A framework, something that requires presence and patience to understand. Being misunderstood wasn't your failure, it was your filter. It kept the unqualified from building where they had no business being. And that frustration you carried from not being seen clearly, that was actually refining your clarity. Every time someone misunderstood your heart, you had to go deeper into yourself to protect it, define it, and sharpen it. That's how you mastered discernment. That's how you learned to speak with precision and move with intention. Now, the people showing up in your life aren't confused by you. They're intrigued. They're not intimidated by your depth. They're equipped to meet it, because only builders know what to do with a blueprint. Everyone else just stares and complains that it doesn't look finished. You weren't born to be instantly liked. You were born to be understood by the right ones. Misunderstanding wasn't your curse. It was your clarity being protected. And now that you've mastered your own design, you're impossible to misread, and even more impossible to replace. Number 8, you weren't abandoned, you were repositioned. They didn't leave you, they were removed, cleanly, precisely. And at the exact moment their presence started costing more than it contributed. At the time it felt like abandonment, the silence, the distance, the sudden shift in people who once swore they'd never fold on you. You sat with the pain, trying to figure out what you did wrong, wondering how loyalty could dissolve that fast. But it wasn't your fault. It was alignment doing its job. What you thought was rejection was actually repositioning, a surgical separation from anything not designed to walk with you into your next chapter. It wasn't loneliness, it was solitude. And those are not the same thing. Loneliness begs for company. Solitude prepares you for purpose, that isolation you went through. That wasn't punishment, it was preparation. That's where the download came, the vision, the clarity, the instructions. The stripping away wasn't to leave you empty, it was to clear the space for something royal, something precise, something tailored to you. That's where the crown was delivered. Not in a crowd, not in applause, but in the quiet when it was just you, your resilience, and whatever was left of your belief in yourself. The people who walked away couldn't have stayed. Not because they were all malicious, but because they weren't wired for where you were going. They were tied to a version of you that no longer exists. Keeping them around would have meant shrinking back into that outdated mold. So they were pulled, surgically, strategically, so you could breathe without performing, so you could see without distortion, so you could finally hear what your spirit had been trying to say under all the noise. You didn't lose people, you lost distractions, you lost delays, you lost the weight that kept you walking in circles. Now you move with direction, with authority, with peace, and with the crown that came not after the crowd, but after the cut. Number 9, you didn't just survive. You outperformed your curse. You didn't just make it out. You transformed what you came from. You weren't sent here to barely survive cycles. You were sent here to shatter them. The fear, the silence, the dysfunction, the scarcity, the self-doubt that ran deep in your bloodline, you faced all of it. And instead of passing it down, you stood in front of it, alone at times, misunderstood often, but unmoved. You didn't just carry the weight. You restructured the foundation it stood on. People talk about being chosen like it's some golden ticket, but in reality, being chosen often looks like being burdened with the stuff no one else wanted to deal with. You got the trauma no one talked about, the responsibility nobody else picked up, the emotions that were pushed under the rug for generations. You weren't picked to be the favorite. You were picked to be the breaker, the pattern disruptor, the one who wouldn't fold even when everything around you said to. You weren't just chosen to endure the curse, you were chosen to disprove it. Every time you did something differently, every time you chose healing over bitterness, boundaries over dysfunction, truth over silence, you were rewriting a script that had been recycled for decades. You became the proof that bloodlines don't dictate destiny. That pain doesn't have to become identity, that you can come from chaos and still build peace, real peace, rooted peace. You didn't just escape what tried to destroy you, you built from it. You took what was meant to break you and used it as blueprint material. You broke the mold and then used the fragments to design something no one before you had the language or freedom to dream up. You outperformed what was expected of you, not out of spite, but out of deep, unapologetic purpose. You weren't just the exception, you became the new standard. And that's why your existence now isn't just a survival story, it's the blueprint for everything that comes after you. Number 10. Your abundance isn't coming as it's been looking for you. Your abundance was never lost. It was waiting for you to show up as the real you. Not the version you performed to be liked. Not the watered-down self you became to survive rooms that couldn't handle your fullness. Your blessings didn't ghost you. They couldn't find you because you were out of position. You weren't aligned. You were adapting. And abundance doesn't respond to adaptation. It responds to authenticity. All those years it felt like nothing was working, like everything good was almost but never quite. It wasn't because you weren't worthy. It was because you were negotiating your truth. You were trying to stay safe in places that needed you to shrink. You were loyal to being understood more than being real. And blessings don't land in disguise. They land where the truth is loud, clear, and fully owned. The moment you dropped the mask, stopped auditioning for love, and chose alignment over approval, the signal got clear. And the blessings that felt delayed, they were rerouting, not denying you. This isn't luck coming in. This is reconciliation. This is everything that had your name on it circling back. Now that you've stopped hiding in plain sight, this season isn't about earning, it's about receiving. It's about finally being in the right place, as the right version of you, with no filter, no shame, no apology. You're not attracting random good things. You're aligning with what's always been yours. You're not stepping into abundance. You're stepping into yourself. And when that happens, everything that matches your frequency shows up without the force, without the chase, and without the confusion. So no, your abundance isn't on the way. It's been trying to find you, the real you. And now that you've stopped pretending, it's arriving with clarity, precision, and a speed that looks like magic but is really just alignment, finally doing what it was always meant to. Number 11, you never lacked support. You just outgrew dependency. You weren't weak when people didn't show up for you. You were learning how to stand on your own 2 feet so firmly that no one could knock you over. The absence of support wasn't a void. It was the forge where you built your strength. Being left to navigate your battles alone wasn't a curse. It was the training ground that taught you to rely on yourself first and foremost. Dependency was never the goal. It was the trap you refused to fall into. And in refusing, you became something rare, unshakable. Now that you've mastered standing alone, something remarkable happens. You don't just attract any presence, you attract presence with substance. People don't come around to protect a fragile version of you because that version no longer exists. They come because your energy carries weight. You've become a force that commands respect simply by being. The defense you receive now isn't about guarding weakness, it's about backing up power. When someone fights for you at this stage, it's not charity, it's investment. It's loyalty to something real, something worthy. Support used to be something you craved because you felt incomplete without it, but you outgrew that. Now support is a reflection of who you've become. It's not something that makes you stronger. It's the echo of strength you already own. That's a big shift. It means you're no longer vulnerable because others are there. You're valuable enough to inspire others to stand with you because of who you are, not what you lack. People fight for you because your presence changes the game. Because you don't just carry your story, you embody its power. You're no longer the person who needs saving. You're the one worth defending. That's a profound transformation. It's why your circle looks different now, not bigger, just stronger and fully aligned with the weight you carry. Number 12, your silence wasn't strength. It was misdiagnosed self-abandonment. For a long time, silence felt like your only option. You held your tongue not because you had nothing to say, but because speaking up felt dangerous, exhausting, or pointless. You learned to mute yourself to avoid conflict, to dodge judgment, or simply to keep the peace. That silence was mistaken by others and maybe even by yourself as strength, but it was really self-abandonment disguised as survival. You gave up your voice to protect your spirit, but in doing so, you also lost a part of yourself. Now, that dynamic is breaking. The world that once demanded your quiet is being forced to adjust because you finally reclaimed your tone. You realize that your voice isn't just noise, it's power, clarity, and truth. Speaking up doesn't mean being loud or aggressive, it means being real. When you start speaking your mind, not from anger or ego, but from a place of clear intention and self-respect, the room changes, the energy shifts. The tables you thought were fixed, they start to rearrange themselves around your presence. Your words aren't just sounds, they're signals. They tell the world you're here fully, unapologetically, and with a newfound authority. People who once overlooked or underestimated you suddenly have to listen, because when you reclaim your tone, you're no longer participating in a game where silence is survival. You're setting the rules. You no longer have to fight to be heard. Your voice demands it. This shift isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about honoring yourself. It's about stepping out of the shadows of your own silence and into the light of your own truth. And as you do, everything around you responds. The respect you deserve, the space you need, the influence you command, it all follows your words. So speak, not for them, but for you, and watch the world adjust itself to the volume of your power. Number 13, your value never increased, their vision did. You haven't suddenly become more valuable overnight. You haven't magically transformed into something new or different. The truth is your value was always there, solid, undeniable, and rare. The problem was never you, the problem was their vision. For so long they looked through lenses clouded by their own limits, biases, or insecurities. They couldn't see the worth that was right in front of them because their sight wasn't trained to recognize true gold. You were standing in a room full of people who were blind to your brilliance. It wasn't that you weren't shining, it was that they didn't have the eyes to see. You carried that gold quietly, consistently, often alone. You didn't wait for their approval or validation because you knew what you held inside. You knew the weight of your worth even when no one else could grasp it. Now the shift is happening. The room is waking up. The people who once overlooked you are now marveling at what they missed. Suddenly, what you offered looks like a miracle to them because their vision has been recalibrated. They're finally able to see the shimmer, the depth, and the power you've carried all along. But for you, it's not new. It's just reality catching up. This isn't about ego or boasting. It's about understanding that value is constant, but perception is fluid. You don't level up for others to recognize you. You level up because you know your own worth, and eventually others have no choice but to catch up. The miracle isn't you changing. It's their eyes opening. So keep holding your gold with quiet confidence. Their vision might be delayed, but it's arriving. And when it does, the recognition won't feel like surprise to you. It will feel like justice, because you've been this valuable all along. They just needed to learn how to see. Number 14. You're not defended because you're fragile. You're defended because you're vital. You're not protected because you're delicate or in need of saving. Quite the opposite. You're defended because you matter, because you are essential. Think of yourself as the keystone, the single crucial piece that holds the entire arch of the next era together. Without you, the structure doesn't stand. The mission you carry isn't just the next step. It's a leap beyond what anyone around you has seen before. That's why the kind of defense you have now is different. It's not about shielding a weak spot. It's about safeguarding a powerhouse. The irony is thick. The very forces, people, or energies that once pushed against you are now the ones standing in your corner. They've changed, evolved, or maybe they never truly opposed you. They opposed a version of you that wasn't fully realized yet. But your authenticity, the raw weight of who you've become, has flipped the script. What used to be resistance is now reinforcement. What was once opposition has become your strongest ally. This is no coincidence. It's a natural reaction to the kind of force you've become. People don't rally around fragility, they rally around vitality. The presence you carry now demands protection because losing you means losing the foundation for what's coming. Your authenticity is magnetic and disruptive. It forces the world to shift, recalibrate, and sometimes even rewrite rules. So the guards at your gate, they're there not because you're vulnerable, but because you're irreplaceable. They've shown up because the mission you're on is bigger than any individual ego or agenda. This defense is about honoring the role you play in the bigger picture. You're vital, and now you're finally being protected as such. You were never becoming, you were remembering. Every storm you survived wasn't a delay. It was a reveal. Every exile wasn't rejection. It was divine editing. And every moment you doubted yourself was a side effect of standing in rooms not built to recognize the architecture of a chosen one. But now, the architecture is visible. The alignment is precise. The shift is undeniable. You were never fragile. You were foundational. Never too much, just too early for their comprehension. And now the timeline has caught up to your frequency. The very truths you were mocked for are the ones they now whisper like revelations. The silence that once suffocated you has become your amplifier. The solitude that once felt like punishment is now the sacred ground where your downloads landed and your roots deepened. You didn't just survive the wilderness, you mapped it. You didn't just break curses, you reauthored legacy. You weren't built for applause, you were designed for impact. There's a reason the tables are turning, the guards are shifting, and the ones who once resisted you are now realigning. Because your presence has become undeniable. Not because it got louder, but because it got clearer. You've stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You've stopped waiting for validation from voices that never saw your value in the first place. You've stopped trying to make your light digestible to those who never learned to handle heat. Now, you shine and you scorch, and whoever can't withstand it moves. This isn't your rise, it's your return. A return to your voice, a return to your crown, a return to your essence before the world taught you to shrink. The defenders showing up now aren't saving you, they're joining you. The abundance pouring in isn't random, it's reconciliation. And the power you carry isn't borrowed, it's embodied. So walk like you're the blueprint, speak like your voice rebuilds timelines. and exist like your presence is prophecy, because it is. You're not next, you're now. If this message cracked something open in you, if it reminded you of your power, your purpose, or the truth you've been silently carrying, then don't just leave with goosebumps. Leave with momentum. Hit that subscribe button like you're claiming your next chapter. Like this video, if something in it echoed what you've always known deep down. And drop a comment, not just to be seen, but to be heard. Your story, your insight, your presence, it matters here. And if you know someone who's been silently fighting their way through the fire, someone who's chosen but forgotten just how powerful that really is, share this with them. Be the reflection that reminds them they're not alone. This isn't just content, this is confirmation. And around here, we don't just watch, we awaken. So stay connected, stay bold, stay true, because your frequency just found its home.